Australia's future will be determined by what happens in the Great North. So to my right, courtesy of a great wilderness and landscape photographer, Kerry Trapnell, is the North Kennedy River in flood. In the background, Jane Table Hill, an important cultural site. It's now part of the Rinniru, formerly the Lakefield National Park. And those of you who've spent time on country, and certainly Indigenous people, will recognise both the significance and the undertaking that has enabled that to become a park named in that way. That's an example of a positive result that follows persistent endeavour. So, Australia's future will be determined by what happens in the north. The reasons are straightforward. Firstly, as you know, here multiple fossil fuel developments, escalating greenhouse gas emissions are on foot. Global warming, global heating really turbocharged, more on the way. Woodside's just extended northwest shelf, the carbon bomb, the Browse Basin to come, fracking plans in the Beetaloo and in WA's Canning Basin, the ill-judged monster Middle Arm Point proposal, only a short drive from where we are today, all located in Australia's north. And as Kirsty reflected, residents of the Northern Territory are essentially being climate sacrificed by territory, state and federal governments in thrall to fossil fuel companies. Yesterday's climate risk assessment points out that the Northern Territory and equivalent regions in the adjacent states will experience the greatest increase in temperatures, with numerous communities to experience, and I quote, very high to extreme risks. The dissonance is jarring. The failure to exercise duty of care by our elected representatives is damning. Second reason why Australia's future will be determined by what happens in the north. Across the sweep of Northern Australia, from Kimberley to Cape York, lie land and seascapes of extraordinary cultural and environmental significance, still relatively rich in biodiversity. And they too, under growing threat, notably the big river systems, not only from climate impacts, but from typically poorly considered decisions, deficient development proposals. You'll know about them, you'll hear about more of them soon. Thirdly, the third reason, national reconciliation, partly derailed by the failure of the Voice referendum, but still necessary to ground and heal modern Australia. That goes on here in the Great North. In this region, First Peoples make up a substantial proportion of the population. They own and control significant swathes of country, their country. Increasing First Peoples' participation in all aspects of land and sea management is a crucial dynamic, embedding greater local control and improving social well-being. The highly successful Indigenous Rangers program, a shining example. Lastly, but not least, Australia's future defence. Everything these three words, Australia's future defence, encompasses, is increasingly being determined in the north. Since Federation, fearful of large Asian populations so close at hand, our weather eye has always squinted in that direction. But Australia is now subject to the push-pull of the world's two largest economies and militaries, the United States and China, with emerging contests over territories and markets. With little public debate, the militarisation of the top end continues apace. Increased foreign troop deployments, integrated military exercises, particularly with the US, and ramping up the establishment of military infrastructure, all on the go. The Washington Centre for Strategic and Budget Assessment reported in The Australian as stating, and I quote, Northern Australia can serve as a venue where friendly forces train and experiment in peacetime, as a base from which they deploy, and as a hub that sustains them in wartime. I'm being a bit facetious, but it's no exaggeration to say that in this lightly populated, still remote neighbourhood, the future character and shape of democratic Australia will be forged. The most important aspect in relation to defence planning is whether indeed it is just that, orientated to defence, or, as per the appalling AUKUS deal that's being foisted upon us, we're moving to an expeditionary force setup, designed, as many analysts have noted, for joint operations with the US. I think the answer to that quandary is the latter. More of it at a later time. As a young teen, I remember, like it was yesterday really, heading north to visit family, sitting in a propeller-driven tin can in the sky, looking down at an aqua coastline, no longer deep blue. Eventually, as it happened, we landed just across the way in PNG. Mountains, rainforests, river and water. Water everywhere. Water, incidentally, that flows under the Torres Strait and turns up in springs and rock pools in the Kimberley. And of course, the heat all around us. Best metaphor I could come up with, supermarket chickens suffocating in glad wrap. I remember sitting around a fire in a dry, multicoloured savanna grassland, a Garden of Eden, Anglo word, desert, listening and learning from the old men, and vowing with my midnight oil colleagues to honour that connection. I remember reading about Kalkarinji, seeing the Uluru Handback, a generous gifting by traditional owners of that unique national park. I remember being at the start of the Titanic struggle, nearly done, at Jabiluka, watching the ABC News as Eddie Mabo marched faithfully up the steps of the High Court in Canberra. Finally, he and his people, all First Peoples, vindicated. Later, crisscrossing the Great North from Cape Levesque to Barunga to Shelburne Bay, getting behind the Environment Minister's desk, putting caring for country in place, seeing the good laws and regulations that protected country was needed more than ever. World Heritage listings, additional national parks, expanded IPAs, getting excited by private land conservation purchases, and whatever else could be squeezed out of governments, state and federal. Yet all the time, the pressure kept building across the top end. Mines, airfields, dams on wild rivers, unrestrained land clearing for cotton, gas wherever possible, get-rich schemes aplenty. And ringing out across Darwin Harbour, the discordant squeaks of the revolving door as political leaders, once done serving in public office, head out and work for, read serve, the big corporates in a small territory still substantially dependent on Commonwealth funding. I remember well hearing the repeated calls by Indigenous leaders for meaningful self-determination and the growing evidence produced by conservation organisations and scientists, some of whom are here, that our unique local plants, animals and ecosystems were in trouble. And the days and nights getting hotter and hotter. So this conference does take place as the tectonic plates of human history are buckling, when humans and the big, brutal entities they permit to operate are upending the natural cycles that govern life on planet Earth. Sometimes it's hard to find words to describe where we find ourselves, but I believe, still believe, that the innate human capacity to act with imagination and purpose and find new ways of responding is still present here in this room and wherever people of good heart and fair mind gather. Spare us the clowns when the stakes are so high, when political parties and leaders act like it's business as usual, or worse, when autocrats or would-be autocrats, like Donald Trump, peddle lies and intimidation, the stale bread and rancid butter of domestic and international relations. This is the world we're living in. Our simple obligation, a word familiar to Indigenous people, is to honour and cherish and protect, for everyone's sake, the creation. Our task is to agree on a solid plan to do just this, utilising workable strategies, not just words and processes, committing to the seriousness of the moment to help drive the change needed. There's ambition and complexity in the Great North Conference agenda, and I applaud that. By the way, previous gatherings of this kind, like the Charles Darwin University Symposium in the early 2000s, show that the environment movement was right or correct. That is, able to identify risks to the natural world and to advance solutions to those risks. Needless to say, the boosters who drooled over Darwin increasing its population to 1 million in a decade or two were slightly off the mark. And there are notable achievements to inspire us and to build on. James Price Point, Shelburne Bay, Jabiluka, Ningaloo, and others. Yet being right hasn't altered the trajectory of environmental decay, nor automatically translated into the level of public support needed to buttress successful campaigns, especially in a rapidly heating world. Elders rightly have much respect in the blackfella world. In whitefella world, less so. But I'm going to use up whatever purchase I have by advocating that place-based relationships and campaigns with mutual respect and willingness to be there for the long haul, with peaceful, non-violent direct action alongside community organising as a primary campaign tool is key. A healthy land equals healthy people. This is the story to share and excite our fellow citizens, working in concert, together to make a safer, fairer future. And, as Kirsty pointed out, fortunately we are heirs to a deeper understanding which can feed that sharing story, originated from people who lived here much longer. When Big Bill Nedgy, Kakadu man, said, and I quote, "Listen carefully to the spirit, you will feel it. Places for us, earth for us, star, moon, tree, animal, same like us." Our friend that, he was articulating the basic starting point. And Professor Rose, informed by Hobbles Daniari, a Mudborough man from Wave Hill, observes ecological systems adhere to the same set of understandings, where kinship, in the broader sense, is more than just human connectivity. This notion of expanded kinship is powerful and necessary because it ties human beings to other kinds of animal and plants and to the wider seasons and the patterns of Earth and of the cosmos. One often hears Aboriginal people express a relationship to land in this way, but how often do we actually take it seriously enough to reconfigure our politics and relationships to give it full meaning? It's time to address the fact that current campaign approaches, notwithstanding occasional successes along the way, are not working as well as the parlous situation requires. We have a larger, more diverse movement than ever, trying to share its goals in a narrow-cast digital jungle. And whilst it's uncomfortable to acknowledge, climate/environment is still not a priority issue for enough people to produce big change. Yes, there are more groups, strategies, meetings, social impact reports, new funding models, statements and the like than ever before. And of course, you in this room are there, but the public is not. Some of this work is hitting the mark. And there's a good list of great things that are happening. The Knitting Nanas helped ensure that northern New South Wales is frack-free. Rising Tide have been generating strong campaign activity. Corporate shareholder pressure has delivered positive change. I witnessed my local bush care group where I live, with admiration. Weeds and ferals out, native plants and animals in. Yet there are also claims of the high moral ground on positioning and perspectives, sometimes resembling an echo chamber of indignation and virtue signalling everywhere, which is puzzling, as if all involved don't broadly share the same goals and values. Are we providing a consistent narrative, a log of accessible demands that the average person in the street understands and will support? Why don't we always act as if this is indeed the climate emergency we proclaim that it is? The major NGOs, environment organisations located in the south, do focus on critical issues in Northern Australia, but are often absent, providing enduring support for the organisations and people who work here, notwithstanding that here is an epicentre of the climate struggle. I hope that can change. For could the stakes be any higher, or a more insightful way of thinking be any more urgently required with the planet hotter than at any time in the last 120,000 years, as we meet in a territory with the highest per capita emissions in the country, and where 70% of your fellow citizens live in high or very high risk areas exposed to climate chaos. Locals wait in vain for the Chief Minister and the opposition leader to respond in any meaningful way to yesterday's reports and these statistics. Now the media has moved on, and crime and sport and Harvey Norman have returned back to the spotlight. Daniari, who I referred to earlier, marks out the space, and I quote, "You, white Australians, making lots of mistakes, but we can be joined in white, black, yellow. We're on this land now. We can be friendly, be mates together. So let's draw on this wisdom and experience, reframe the mythology of exploration and conquest, and review where we find ourselves and what the implications of failing to arrest the descent into hell really means. All those white fella dreamings, the grandiose schemes of the post-squatter generation, the development at any cost crew, they can fade to grey. They offer no genuine solutions, no answers to the scale of this crisis. Nature and culture, culture and nature, along with First Peoples polity, this is what girds the Great North. Closer to Timor than Canberra, transiting out of the post-colonial era, possessing a richness of biodiversity, seascapes, river systems, forests and grasslands on a scale unparalleled on the planet. If we truly want to play a part in looking after this gift and support those who live and work in these special places, then true collaboration, identified by this gathering as core business, and active long-haul participation is the order of the day. This means sharing resources, skills, insights, and power, and sharing a joint vision of the Great North. This means continuing to call out the resources industry. It is in effect a criminal enterprise, knowingly contributing to an activity that is causing harm. This means constantly challenging the climate crisis enablers in politics, foregoing the facile both on pox houses, they're just politicians rhetoric, and applying robust encouragement and relentless peaceful pressure on elected representatives to take these matters more seriously. When Kakadu is flooded, when it's simply too hot to venture outside for weeks on end, making clear who is responsible and that there is a better way. This means bringing the public, citizens, young and old, middle class, grey nomads, city, suburb and bush dwellers along with us. So the call for today is to safeguard the world of tomorrow for those close by and those yet born. I'm confident a trusted, indefatigable climate and environment movement with Indigenous partners and willing allies, all prepared to work together even when it's hard, can make that better future happen. Good luck.